I signed the divorce papers at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. My hand was steady. My breathing was calm. And for one brief, quiet moment, sitting in that lawyer's office with the ink still fresh on the page, I genuinely believed it was finally over. That I could close this chapter, walk out into the afternoon, and never look back. Then, 30 minutes later, my mother-in-law screamed from inside her own living room. Not at me. At her son. The lie he had been feeding her was so enormous, so deliberate, so carefully layered over years, that it only took one document, one single page I had been quietly carrying in my purse, to bring every last piece of it down. Welcome back to Revenge Finally, where the truth always finds its moment. If you're new here, hit subscribe and stay close, because this one is worth every single second. My name is Camila. I'm 34 years old, and I spent nearly a decade of my life quietly, faithfully building someone else's dream, while my own sat untouched in a corner collecting dust, waiting for a turn that was never actually going to come. I met Derek in my mid-20s. He was charming, polished, and full of plans that always managed to sound like promises. He carried himself with the kind of easy, natural confidence that makes you want to believe everything he says, not because it has been proven, but because he says it like it already has been. He was also deeply close to his mother, Renata, and at the time, I genuinely saw that as a sign of good character. A man who loves and respects his mother that completely, I told myself, must know how to love his wife the same way. For the first couple of years, that even seemed true. We felt like a real team. We had a shared vision of what we were building. At least, I believed we did. But somewhere along the way, the team quietly became one person. And that person was me. I was the one working overtime, so his consulting business had enough room to breathe and grow. I was the one who held off replacing my own worn-out car, so Derek could drive something that made the right impression on clients. I managed our finances, handled the mortgage, tracked every bill, and kept our entire household running without ever being asked, because I genuinely believed I was investing in our future together. I wasn't investing in our future. I was just funding him, and he let me do it month after month with a smile on his face. The erosion didn't happen in one dramatic, identifiable moment. That's the cruelest part of this kind of relationship. It takes you apart so gradually, so quietly, that you barely feel it while it's happening. By the time you finally see it clearly for what it is, you've already lost years you cannot get back. It started with small things. He began making offhand comments about my career, calling my project manager role cute at family dinners, then laughing it off when I reacted, as though I was the one being oversensitive about a harmless remark. He grew secretive with his phone. He quietly assumed control of certain accounts I used to have full access to. And whenever I asked questions about money or decisions, he would smile, pat my hand, and say, "Don't worry about it, Camila. I've got it handled." He had nothing handled. He was just making sure I couldn't see clearly enough to ask the right questions. And then there was Renata. What had once felt like a warm, close, loving family bond slowly transformed into something I didn't have the right words for. Every time Derek and I had a disagreement, even a small one, even the kind every couple has and moves past by morning, he would call his mother before the night was over. And within hours, sometimes less, I would receive a carefully worded message from Renata about the importance of standing beside your husband and choosing your marriage over your pride. Every single time, without exception. I wasn't just married to Derek. I was living in a constant, exhausting, invisible competition with the flawless version of him that existed only inside his mother's mind. That version was always patient, always reasonable, always the one being wronged. And in every story he told her, every version of every disagreement between us, I was the problem. I kept going. I kept telling myself things would shift, that he would grow, that we would find our way back to who we used to be. But there's a point where hope stops being a virtue and quietly becomes a habit you no longer know how to put down. Exhaustion has a way of cracking even the most patient person open, slowly, then suddenly, then all at once. The moment that changed everything came on a completely ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Nothing about that day felt significant. It was just another Tuesday. I needed an insurance document and remembered Derek kept his files in the home office, a room I rarely had reason to enter. I found what I was looking for quickly enough. But as I was sliding the drawer closed and turning to leave, something caught my eye. A folder near the back with a label I didn't recognize. I almost kept walking. Something stopped me. Inside was a bank statement for an account I had never seen, never heard of, and was absolutely never meant to find. A high-yield savings account. 6 figures. built quietly and deliberately over years, funded by money being steadily redirected from our joint accounts. Every single transaction disguised neatly under the heading of business expenses. I stood in that office for a long time without moving. I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. I didn't feel the hot, immediate anger I might have expected. What I felt instead was something colder and far more clarifying than rage, complete and absolute certainty. Every moment of confusion I had quietly carried, every question he had brushed aside, every time I had wondered if the distance between us was something I was imagining, all of it clicked into place at once. This was never a struggling marriage. It was a calculated, years-long extraction. I wasn't his partner. I was a resource he had been quietly bleeding while keeping me just distracted enough not to look too closely. I copied the statement. I walked back to the kitchen. I made dinner like nothing had happened. I didn't say a word. And the very next morning, I called a lawyer. Derek never once suspected that anything between us had changed. His arrogance in the weeks that followed was staggering, and honestly, almost impressive in how total and unguarded it was. Because he had no idea what I had found, my composure read to him as defeat. He genuinely believed I was too scared, too financially dependent, too worn down to actually follow through. When I finally served him the papers, he smirked. "You wouldn't survive a week without me," he said, leaning back in his chair like a man watching a movie he'd already seen the ending of. He signed the 50-50 settlement without a single moment of hesitation, because in his mind, he was still the one winning. That hidden account was sitting clean and completely untouched on the other side of this divorce, waiting for him, while I supposedly walked away with half of almost nothing. He was absolutely certain he was 10 steps ahead of me. He had been telling himself that story for years. The day we finalized everything, he let out a small, quiet, satisfied laugh the moment his pen left the paper. Like it was already done. Like he had gotten exactly what he had planned for all along. I just nodded. I picked up my copy of the settlement, and I drove straight to Renata's house. Derek was already there when I arrived, stretched across Renata's sofa like a man who had just returned from a long-awaited victory lap, completely relaxed and utterly at ease with himself. The moment Renata appeared at the front door and saw my face, her expression shifted immediately into something practiced and deeply, deliberately pitying. "Oh, Camila," she said softly, reaching out to touch my arm. "Derek told me everything. I am so sorry you're going through this." I went very still. "What exactly did he tell you, Renata?" Derek still didn't look up from his phone. "She's in denial, Mom. I warned you it would be like this." And then Renata told me. All of it, word by word. Derek had told her I had a gambling addiction, a secret, destructive, years-long problem. That I had quietly accumulated hundreds of thousands of dollars in hidden debt without his knowledge. That our finances were in complete ruin because of me. That the divorce was the only way he could protect himself from the disaster I had created and concealed from everyone. I let her finish, every single word of it. Then I opened my purse and pulled out the settlement copy. "Renata," I said, keeping my voice very calm and very deliberate, "a woman with a gambling addiction and 6 figures of hidden debt does not walk away from a divorce with half a 6-figure savings portfolio and full equity in a paid-down home. Read it. Take your time." I held the paper out. She took it carefully with both hands. Her eyes moved slowly down the page. Then she looked up at her son. "Derek," she whispered, "what is this? You told me there was nothing left. You told me she destroyed everything." He went pale, completely pale. The smirk was entirely gone, replaced by the hollow, desperate look of someone whose story has just run completely out of road. He started to stammer, reaching for words that weren't forming fast enough to matter. But it was already too late. Because Renata was no longer looking at him the way a mother looks at her son. She was looking at him like a stranger she had lived beside for years without ever truly knowing. And then she screamed. Not a gasp. Not quiet tears. A full, raw, primal scream that reached into every corner of that house. The sound of a mother realizing her son had taken her love and used it as a calculated, deliberate weapon against someone who had never deserved it. The sound of years of carefully planted lies collapsing all at once. In a single moment she couldn't slow down or stop. Every story he had ever told her about me, every grievance he had carefully fed her over years, every message she had sent me on his behalf. All of it was falling apart in real time, and she felt every piece of it go. I placed the settlement papers on her coffee table. I turned around, and I walked out. Her voice followed me all the way down the street, and every step I took felt lighter than the one before it. It has been a year since that afternoon. I used my half of the settlement to finally launch the business I had quietly shelved, set aside for years while I was too busy keeping Derek's life running to build anything that was truly mine. It is growing now. It is profitable. It belongs entirely to me. And for the first time in nearly a decade, everything I wake up to in the morning was built by me, chosen by me on my own terms. Renata cut him off completely. The weight of understanding how thoroughly he had used her, how deliberately he had turned her love into a tool to control and isolate me, was something she simply could not carry and still look at him the same way. Without her as his safety net, his emotional anchor, his most loyal and unquestioning defender, Derek's carefully constructed world came apart faster than even I had anticipated. The business failed. The confidence dissolved. The man who once leaned back in a chair and told me I wouldn't survive a single week without him is now the one struggling to find stable ground. He emailed me a few times. Long, winding, dramatic messages about how I had destroyed his life and taken everything he had built. I never replied. Not once. Not a single word. He spent years making me feel small. He spent years convincing everyone around him, especially the one person whose opinion he truly cared about, that I was the liability, the failure, the one holding him back from everything he deserved. But the woman who walked out of that house on a Thursday afternoon, with the truth folded quietly and neatly inside her purse? She turned out just fine. If this story is different, leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. New stories drop every week, and trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next.